Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the live stream. My name is Jon Guild, and I'm going to talk to you guys today how I use the Sliver framework to basically pass the OSEP exam. A brief intro about myself. I am an Air Force veteran, and that's where I got all my cyber training. So I did about a year in the Air Force, just straight training, and then went to a network operations squadron here in Colorado, and ever since then I've been hooked. And just to give you more of a background, once I got out, I continued my cyber training. And I want to kind of go through some of the techniques that I've learned over the years. I've now been in cybersecurity for about 10 years. So everything I've learned is kind of what I've culminated in that time. And it's not just something you pick up like overnight. There's probably some people that can't pick it up overnight, but that wasn't me. I took it all and just found that I really enjoyed this field, enjoyed what I like to do. I like to hack into machines. I did defense for a long time as well, so I've seen that side of the field. And I kind of just want to go through that with you all. And some of the training that I've done was the OSEP. Let me bring up my agenda here. And the OSCP really kickstarted me after I got my OSCP into Active Directory hacking. And that is a really fun area that I found a lot of love in. So with that, when it came down to the OSCP, some of the things that I did that helped me succeed was that I was able to take the pro labs from Hack the Box Cybernetics. That lab really helped kickstart my methodology when I was using my C2 framework Sliver in this case. So I think what a lot of people will struggle with when it comes to the OSCP is that they don't really have a vulnerable environment to target, to use. And so that's what Cybernetic provided me. It gave me a vulnerable environment where I could see where the strengths and weaknesses of Sliver, where I needed to switch to Linux, how the tool set worked and everything. When I was going through the training, when you've signed up for OSCP, they give you some labs to work in, but not always as in-depth as you would want it to be. So that's where Cybernetics really helped out. A con to that, though, is that's really expensive. So when I published this blog post, I mentioned in there is this vulnerable framework you can do. It's called GOAD, Game of Active Directory. Bring it up over here. And you can actually install this on your Linux machine. So this is actually my dedicated Kali machine that I have right here. Let me clear this out. And on my dedicated Kali machine, I have installed this lab, and it's completely vulnerable. It's got a bunch of different attack paths, and the only thing is it's free. It just takes around like 80 gigabytes of space, and some RAM and CPU and whatnot. So if you have a beefy enough machine, I highly recommend installing this and playing around the way I'm going to show you. And let me scroll down here. So in my blog post, what I ended up doing was taking one of the paths that they have. Let me pull this up. There's actually two paths you can take. Let's see if I can bring this up. There we go. I actually took in the blog post, we went to Castle Black and we hacked this machine, and then we escalated over to Winterfell, which is the domain controller in this particular domain. And the end goal is to actually become enterprise admin over here on King's Landing, DC1. For today, we're actually going to look at a different path. And I think this will be really fun to take. We're actually going to attack this machine called Bravos, which is in a different domain. We're going to escalate our privileges up to the Marine domain controller. And from there, actually get enterprise admin on the primary DC over here, sevenkingdoms.local. And you can kind of see the trust that they have and everything. And I will go through, my methodology, how to attack it, and how I think about it. So one other thing just to bring up is like the target audience. I want this to be open to everyone. If you're a beginner, don't know much about Active Directory hacking, or just like Sliver in general, I definitely want you guys to watch this and be a part of it. There's a lot of things to show. When I first started using Sliver, I barely used half of its potential. It wasn't until I took the Certified Red Team Operations certificate course training from Rasta Mouse, where I learned how to use certain tools that was actually present in Cobalt Strike that are actually also present in Sliver. So, having that exposure early on is really going to help if this is what you're into. I think if anything, the people that are get the most out of it, in a sense, are those who are taking the OSEP class or about to take the exam, or even those who have already passed it. And if you're in advance and been in cybersecurity for a while, you're you're a pen tester and all that good stuff, maybe you can stick around and you'll see some new things that I have learned that you may not have known before. I always like watch people that are, same level or more advanced, etc. And then I'll pick something up like, hey, I didn't know I could do that. So with that, if there's any questions that you guys have, feel free to put them in the chat wherever you are. That's Twitter, LinkedIn, or YouTube. The team will actually get them to me. I think I can see some of them over here too. So I would love to be as interactive as possible. And I will try to explain as much of it as I go along. And yeah, so any questions, just pop them in there. So to kind of start off with, we don't really have much. I have Sliver up here. If I pull up my jobs, I have 2 listeners. I have my MTLS basic connection listening on port 443, and I have a staging listener on 80, just in case if we want to use that or not. And over here on the bottom, I just have really regular terminal window that I can use. On my left, I actually have a bunch of notes, as you can see the agenda. But next to it, I actually have a walkthrough over here, which I'm going to use. So that way I'm not fumbling around with all the different commands, but you guys can actually follow along with that as well. But let me go back to the agenda. So first thing we're going to do is enumeration. As anything you want to do, let's take the first step. So I don't really have anything particular to start off with. When it comes to my methodology, when I begin to scan any sort of network, especially when doing the OSEP, you always start with an nmap. We're going to start off with this .23. If you don't have your IPs or don't know what's out on the network, something you can always start with, is crack map exec. So we'll do that over here. We can do crack map exec. If those who don't know what this tool is, it's basically a Swiss Army knife for Active Directory hacking. I use this tool all the time. It's I don't think this is the greatest analogy, but if you were to go into a forest, you want to bring your hatchet or whatever, this is my hatchet. Crack map exec is a huge Swiss Army knife. So I like to start off with, with an SMB scan. So you give it the name of the program, you tell it what kind of scan you want to do. If you just, look at the help like this, you can see the different protocols you guys can do: SMB, MS SQL, WinRM, etc. So SMB is usually the first one I do. And we give it the IP range. Just like this, it's going to go and scan. Let's make that full screen. And like I said, we're actually going to attack starting off with Bravos, and then to Marine, which is actually its domain controller. So its IP is on .23. So whenever you land on an internal network, this is one of the first things I do, just to kind of get a lay of the land, just to get the IP range, scan the whole 24, see what else is out there. So you can also do SSH to see some Linux servers. In this lab, there aren't. So let's kind of get started with that. Let's do a quick nmap scan. It's always good to have something going on in the background. In this case, we're just doing nmap, give it verbose. Basically, it's going to print out any of the discovered ports as it scans, scanning the whole port range. And we're actually doing a fast scan. So instead of going through and doing a service scan and looking at what's running on all those ports, I just want to see what ports are open. I do this because I think it's a more efficient manner to scan the port, to get the ports that are open. And then if you want to tailor it and then go through with nmap and be all right, target these ports specifically, that would be better than versus, hey, I need you to scan all the ports and then see what services are running on them. It makes it very, very slow. But let's just speed it up. We're giving it the .23 over there. But we can see that we got, this interesting port right here, 1433. So it looks like Bravos actually does have MS SQL running, MS SQL. There we go. And we can actually see 135, 139, 445, normal stuff. Interesting enough, it's got port 80 open as well. Seeing that on a server is very interesting. So let's actually go check that out. So if we come over here, we'll use this tab, give it the IP, 23, see what's running on port 80. Nope, it didn't pull it up. 192.168.56.23. There we go. We kind of get a basic IIS server page. Now, something that I've seen over the years taking into this is that certificate services are now a big thing in Active Directory. So whenever I see a splash page like this, I always check to see if the certificate service is running on this machine. So you do that by doing a /cert srv, and we got a basic authentication page. So that's telling me that this machine has ADCS running on it. And we can actually, once we get some credentials, we can actually scan that more. But that's just a quick way to check. And I like to do that. Something else. Okay, so I finished its scan. Here are all the open ports. Like I said, one of the big ones that stands out to me is this one, and then port 80. So something else to think about. Usually when you're landing in an internal network, you want to do some OSINT. You want to look at LinkedIn for a company's users and see like how can you see what our valid usernames are in a network. Well, since this is a lab environment, it doesn't exactly equate the same way, but this is a Game of Thrones themed vulnerable lab. And I think it's totally within the realm to go ask, Chat GPT for some ideas. So I come over here. What I did as I asked Chat GPT, hey, make me a list of all the characters in Game of Thrones. I like for them to be in this format, first dot last. You can try different ones where it's like the first initial, then last name, or it's just first and last name with no dot, or maybe an underscore. You could try different variations. And there's actually a bunch of other tools out there that can do this for you, but this is a quick way to do it as well. So it did that. It gave me some names over here. So let's kind of go through, copy them all. We're going to go back to this over here. Let's remove everything that's in this. Or delete everything in here. Perfect. So we're kind of starting fresh, except for the hashes. Go away, hashes. Okay. So let's make a nano users, just like this. Let's paste in that. Doesn't look the way I want it to, so let's use Vim to get that up. All right. Control V to highlight all these. Go all the way down. X, exit out. There we go. So now if we cat the users, we now have a list of potential users that we could use in this domain. What I'm going to check for next right now, since we're just starting fresh, is if AS rep roasting is enabled. Sometimes usernames will have, or certain users will have, pre-authentication not checked or checked, not needed for their user account. So what that means is that we can actually get users to crack their hash offline. So it's always something worth checking right away. And something else to check, I always do this too, is using crackmap.exec, is that sometimes users will use their username as their password. So you can actually do that like this. So we use crackmap.exec. We'll just go down to 23. We'll give it the user file like this, give it the password of users, and then we'll do continue on success, and then dash no root. And I think it's no root. If you do this, what's essentially what we're doing is we're passing the same user file as their passwords, and we're going to tell it to not brute force. We want to basically, try Samuel Tarley as Samuel Tarley's password. And you'll be surprised at how often this appears in an actual corporate environment. It happens quite often. So it's always something good to check. If it is, you don't want to start brute forcing an Active Directory environment because you don't want to lock out these users. But if I'm going to try anything, it's this one. You can also try, like that summer 2023 or fall or autumn, whatever it is, maybe even the company name, then the year, maybe an exclamation point. But this is something that I always like to try right off the bat. And to know how you get these flags and everything, I just looked at the help file. I'll show you that in a second. Let's do enter. It's going to try it. So this is really interesting because it's saying that they're all valid, but they're not. So anyway, this is something I do like to try. Something else to do is to actually look at curb root to see which users are valid. So we don't even know if these users are valid here. So we can actually do that with curb root over here. So come over here, grab this command. We're going to run curb root. This is another tool you can use within an internal network. I really like it. You're going to give the user enum, the domain. Our domain is sos.local. You can see that over here. When we actually did our crack map exec from before, scroll up. From here, you can actually see the different domains. So King's Landing is 7kingdoms.local. And then we have, sos.local for marine, which is the domain controller, etc. So let's try this. We're going to give the users files that we have, and it should tell us, all right, actually we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 valid users out of that users that we provided. We have Viserys, Daenerys, Khal Drogo, and Jorah. And Khal Drogo actually has over here that it is AS roastable. So what that means is we can actually take this hash and crack it offline and see if we can get a password for it. And just so you know, like I have like fiddled with this tool before, with curb root, and I haven't been able to crack it. I'm not sure why. Sometimes it's just good to have different tools to do different things. But it's good to know that this tool lets you know, like, hey, you can crack this hash offline. So even if this hash doesn't crack, we'll use a different tool to do that. So here, we're going to use from the InPacket toolset, get NP users. Now, in the OSEP, course material, they talk about InPacket a few times. It is an invaluable tool. Just like crack map exec, something that I will take with me like everywhere, having the InPacket toolset installed and knowing how to use it is invaluable, not just for the exam, but if this is what you want to do in your career, just having that tool available and knowing how to use it does wonders. So let's actually run it over here. All we're doing is we're running the get NP users, which is just another fancy way of saying, AS rep roasting. We're going to give it the DC IP, which is .12. That's marine. And we're going to give it just the domain. We're not even going to give it like any user because we don't have any valid user accounts, but we're going to give it this user file. And the format is hashcat because that's the format I want to use to crack it. And it gave us this one over here. And you can see that says UF don't require pre-auth set. CalDrogo does, which is why we can grab this hash and crack it. So let's grab it. And let's make a file called hashes. Paste that in there, and let's run hashcat. So with hashcat over here, we're running it with TAC M 18200. This is the format you want to use. If you don't know the format, you can always go to hashcat examples like this. Let's go back over here. I just grab like the first couple characters like this, and then just do a search like that. And there is 18200 is the mode we want to use. It's just that simple, so nothing crazy. And we're going to try to crack it. We gave it the hashes file, and here is the word list, just typical RockU. Give it a run, give it a second, and it says recovered 1 out of 1. We scroll up, we get a password of horse. So that makes sense if you've seen the show, CalDrogo and the Dothraki love their horses. So password of horse kind of makes sense. So now that we have that, we actually have our first like user account. And what can we do with an initial like low? We don't know if he's like low or a high privilege user. We can do a lot of enumeration. We can actually go back and use a crack map exec, but this time we can actually give it a user account. So let's do CME, crack map exec. You can shorthand it to CME, SMB. Let's just do it like this. .23. You can see I've kind of done this a couple times. Delete all this. We don't need that. And let's just run it. And we're actually going to do it on like this, 12.through 23. Make that full screen. Okay. That's interesting to see right off the bat. First off, Marine shows that he is a valid user here, but also on Bravos, which is the first machine we want to actually hack into, it says pwned, which to me tells me that this is a local admin on this machine. So you might get lucky with that sometimes, you might not. But something to keep in mind from our initial recon was that this user also, this machine also had MS SQL running on it. So we can actually check that out in case you didn't want to like, go straight for the throat and just, be admin on this machine. Something else to check out when it comes to like enumeration, and this is like part of my methodology, is to use the different modules. So if we actually get rid of all this, if you haven't checked out crack map exec, it does list out the SMB modules that you can use. So if you do -L, it's going to give you a bunch of different things you can use. There's a lot. Some of the ones that I like a lot, where are they? Is Petit Potam. Petit Potam is basically a coercion. I don't want to say vulnerability, but it's just a coercion method, kind of like the print spooler that they teach you in the course. Essentially, we can make computers authenticate to us, and we can relay that if it's possible and needed in that domain. And there's a couple other ones in here too. Let's see, Slinky, if you want to put in some Windows shortcuts to see if someone's going to go in there, you can get a hash that way. There's just a bunch of different modules you can do in here. So let's do -m, for petit potem. You just give it the options like that. Let's just do the domain controller. And it does say it's vulnerable. That to me is just saying like, hey, we can use petit potem in the future if we want to coerce this domain controller to authenticate to our machine, and then we can relay that. Something else to show, something that I've now included in my methodology is to look for Active Directory certificate services. So if you go over here to LDAP, and same things before, let's take a look at the modules. We can see we actually got quite a few. So we got ADCS we're going to run. We can do enumerate trust. That's a great one to do. If you can read the lapse passwords. The machine account quota. There's a gold mine here. So whenever I get my first domain user, I usually do the LDAP modules here because there's a lot of good information you can get. And this will be invaluable like once you land inside of a network, if you're doing the OSEP and stuff, if you want to query and be like, what is out there? What can I do? What is my machine account quota? Like, is it 0 or is it the default is 10? Which if you don't know what this is, the default 10 machines, you can create, any user can create 10 machines in a network. And what that means is that you can just create a computer account that you know the username and password of. And there's a couple of different primitives we can use to escalate privileges, which is actually what I'm going to show later. So let's do this. 192.168. Oh, you can see. You can also do curb roasting there as well. Let's do -m machine account quota, just like this. And we can see that the machine account quota is the default 10. Something else to check, like I said, ADCS. We saw that on port 80 that the certificate service was running, and it did find an enrollment server. Now, when I went through the OSCP course material, was like over a year ago now, they didn't teach ADCS. I'm not sure if that's been updated now to reflect that, but to be honest, this is something that I think you should incorporate into your methodology to look for regardless. ADCS, it can be, if it's set up incorrectly, it can lead to domain admin right away. It's very powerful. It's something you should just always look for at this point. And yeah, we can see here we have the SSCA and it's on Bravos. So as we saw, Cal Drogas actually owns the machine. So we actually own the certificate service on there. I'm going to show a different way. Since we own this machine basically already, we can actually do what's called a golden certificate. We can actually get a backup of the certificate and then generate it and be any user on the domain. So there's actually multiple ways to like escalate your privileges. So like just by owning this and knowing that we have certificate services, we can be anyone. So that's very, very powerful. Another one I like to look at is trusts. Nope. Trust. Oh, I swear. Oh, enum trust. There we go. So let's run this one. Just like that. And we can see we actually do have a trust with 7 kingdoms. It's bidirectional and it's force transitive. So this is not, we're not within the domain of 7 kingdoms whatsoever. We are an external forest, but there's some transitivity there. Anyway, that's what it is. This is like some of the initial enumeration steps that I do like to do. Something else to show before we keep going on was like that MS SQL was running. When I was practicing for the OSCP, in the course materials, they taught how to create your own C# binary and how to run queries and how to use those queries to enumerate. Can you impersonate someone? How do you enumerate those links within the MS SQL? And it was very tedious to compile the binary, upload to my machine, execute it on the target, then go back and change it and everything else. When I said with Impacket it's very, very powerful, I mean, they actually have, just like this, their own tool. The Impacket toolkit is just a way to interact with different protocols. And that's just a fancy way of saying it can interact with Windows Active Directory. So here, we're going to give it the MS SQL SQL client, and we're going to give it our domain, our user, Cal Drogo, with a password of horse, and the target that we want to hit, Bravos. And we're actually going to give it the Windows auth. If we don't, it's going to fail. So it's going to say login failed because it's going to try to like log in kind of like locally, essentially. But if we do Windows auth, which is like this, we actually have a shell on there. And once you do like enough MS SQL exploitation, this service actually runs with SE impersonate. Anyone who's on like any Windows privilege escalation, when you see the SE impersonate privilege, that means you are system. That's basically what it means. So if you can exploit this service on this machine, you can then escalate privileges to system and then just own the machine. So if we run help here, we can see the different commands you can do. When I was talking about before that you had to compile all these binaries, that's what they showed you in the course. This stuff does it automatically for you. So like, we can enumerate the different logins. So if I just paste that in there, we actually have a lot. That tells me that Cal Drogo is a system administrator on this box. So we can actually take SA over here, and we can execute as login. You can see there's actually two here: execute as user, execute as login. The way I like to think about these two is that executing as login is basically you're logging into the machine, and executing as user is basically more restricted and is giving you access to a database. So we want to do execute as login, and then we're going to give it SA, and we're now the system administrator through here. So we go back to help. If you want to execute command shells on here, you want to enable this, and you have to have SA privileges to do that. So if we hit this, it just does it for you, and we can now execute commands on here. And just to show you, let's do execute command shell just like this, and then we can do I don't know, who am I? It says we are the SS SQL service. Let's do who am I /all. And you can see it gives us the SE impersonate privilege. So if we wanted to exploit this and go down that route, we can. All right, but we don't need to. Like I said, Cal Drogo is basically a system administrator. Is the owner of the Bravos. It showed us that in crack map exec with the pwned. So we can just use evo winrm. Ignore that. It's just like this. We give the username and password, and we're logged in. We do who am I /all, and you can see that we're definitely an administrator, whether it's local or whatever. We're supposed to be owning this box. This machine is now done, and that's great. So I wanted to really showcase Sliver when it came to this, because that's what I used during the OSEP. When I was looking through the different C2 frameworks that I want to use, can't use Cobalt Strike or anything like that, and I think they teach you Interpreter in the course and stuff like that. I wasn't a big fan of using Interpreter, and I didn't want to use like Posh C2 or anything like that. I was really drawn to Sliver, and I really wanted to use that. So if you want to get the full potential of it, you need some sort of a loader. And I did want to take just like a few minutes to look at how you can build your own loader on, so you can bypass AV. Because in my blog, I actually mentioned that bypassing AV is crucial. You have to know how to do that. So you can do that through PowerShell. You can bypass AMSI. I'll show you guys that later and stuff. But having your own loader, knowing how to build one, is very powerful. So let's actually switch over to my Windows box, and here we are. So this is like one loader that I was practicing with, and we're actually going to start off with a new one. I'm going to show you guys how to make this from scratch. So we'll kind of go through here. What I did was I came over to this early bird technique over here. When I actually went through OSCP, I used this repository. I don't know how to pronounce his name here, but this was like a godsend. He actually has a weblog as well, where he talks about the different techniques he used on the OSCP exam. So I used that exclusively, and I used his code snippets. The shellcode process hollowing is great. It's written in C#. I've been going through the Maldiv Academy, and I highly recommend it. I've gotten some awesome understanding of how C works and building your own loaders and stuff. This stuff works great, but I kind of wanted to take a look at building my own stuff. So that's kind of what we're going to go through. So all I did was, when I built my loader here, was I just copied this entire thing. You don't need this top part. I don't know why it includes that, but you can just copy all this, and that's kind of like what I did over here. So we'll actually come over here to this early bird one. And if you come down to the main function, I ended up just pasting it in here. Early bird is just a technique on how to spawn a service in a suspended state. So all we're doing is using Windows APIs to create Notepad in a suspended state. That's all we're doing. Once we have it in a suspended state, we're going to use virtual allocation to basically allocate some memory. And then we're going to write that memory. And then we're going to use Q user APC to start this alertable thread that we actually set in a suspended state. All that's a fancy way of saying is we're creating a program and we're going to inject our shellcode into it. That's it. And if you copy and paste what he has here, it's going to get flagged. And it's going to get flagged by Defender because one is this. This is just going to pop calculator for you. It's just going to pop calc. And this is generated from MSF Venom and is a known static and it's basically known bad. Even though calculator isn't bad, it coming from MSF Venom and knowing that it's used to test out malware and stuff, Windows Defender is going to flag on it. So you have a couple ways of getting around it. One way of doing that is to host the shellcode yourself, host it on your server, and then you can have your loader remotely download it. Another way is to encode it or encrypt it in your loader itself, which is actually the kind of method that I did. And you can see in this case, he used calc, but here we used Notepad. We just switched it up to Notepad. So one thing I did then was I hosted the shellcode over here. I created a new shellcode file. I'll show you guys how to do that here in a second, but it's massive. When it comes to Sliver binaries, when you get the shellcode, they are huge. Like this is what? It's over 800,000 lines. Like this is just massive. But this is all, I'll show you how I got this. But we just have an unsigned character buff array, and then we have the link at the very, very bottom. That's the problem with these huge loaders in Visual Studio. They tend to hang up like that. So all I did was put that in a separate file, and then I'm calling it using the extern, saying, hey, this is an external file. That way it knows where it is. So we're telling it it's an unsigned character buff, and then unsigned integer buff length. Those are the only two things we need. Now, what I did was I encrypted it, and I used this RC4 encryption routine. It's nothing crazy. It's literally just what RC4 is. This is a symmetrical encryption algorithm. When you do it one way, it works the same way backwards to decrypt it. So that's all we're doing here. And we go down over here. I'll talk about that one in a second. All I got to do is add in the key. And I encrypted it with this key that I called, ntdll.dll. So that way, if anyone's looking at it, it looks kind of, I won't say benign, but it's like, all right, ntdll is doing something, but it's actually my key. After that, it still gets caught. When you run the binary, and it's going to basically go through, it's going to decrypt the shellcode, and it's going to try to inject it. Defender's going to catch it. And the reason it catches it is because it's running the binary. It has two ways of kind of detecting something on a box. One way is static, looking at known signatures. So if you put calculator on there, it's going to look at it and be like, hey, I see bad bytes in here. So that's why we encrypted it. But whenever you are about to execute it, or I think you even just look at the file, it runs in its sandbox within Defender. And it'll look through and go like, hey, I'm seeing bad bytes here. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to delete it. So in order to get around that, we're going to do a delay function. And that's what this is here. The delay function is just going to check to see if it's running in a sandbox. And all I did for this code was I just looked up a C library. Hey, how do I do a time delay comparison? And I literally just copied this. All you needed to include was this time directive header. And I just copied everything that was inside this main function. And if we go back, take a look at it, I just kind of copy pasted it, but I changed it up a little bit. This is the same. This is the same. I made the integer I here 6. You can change it to the number of seconds that you want for your delay. 10 would be a delay of 10 seconds, but I put 6 for here. And then we're starting a clock. And I'm printing out, sleeping for X amount of seconds. And then the sleep function, this is where Defender will fast forward. It's going to go through and be like, hey, is there a sleep function? If there is, I'm going to skip it because I don't have enough time to wait around for this program to do whatever. And then we're going to end the clock. After it's ended, I'm going to do a comparison here saying like, hey, the time it took for the program to start, or the time it took for the program to run versus minus time it took to start, if it's less than, you could do I if you want, but I just did 4.5 seconds. If it's less than this time, I want you to exit. Just don't run. And then Defender will scan it and go like, hey, I'm skipping this sleep function here. And then it's going to be like, hey, this didn't do anything malicious. This is good to go. So when it actually runs at runtime, it's going to wait, 6 seconds, and then it's going to go, all right, cool. And then it's going to go and run my shellcode through all of here. So if we actually go and build it, give it a second, generating code. This Sliver shellcode is huge. It succeeded. If we come over to early bird, that's this project here, release, and we can actually click on it, right click, go to prop, nope, show more options. Scan with Microsoft Defender. No current threats. It doesn't see it. So this effectively bypasses Defender, which is great. And I'm going to copy this over to my Kali machine. So let's do that. Give me 1 second. And I actually do got a couple questions. First one is Petit Patam used for a UNC relay. You reference the print spooler service, but as a local admin, you don't need to leverage spooler service for a system. What is the UNC, like the network path? You can do that if you want. What I use Petit Patam for more is if there's like a certificate service running. But yes, you can use that for a UNC relay if you want. So if you see that it actually works like on any machine, like we could use it on Bravos as well. So as long as we have a set of credentials that work, we can actually use that user and trigger it to coerce back to our machine. So when we coerce it back to our machine, we're going to get the machine credentials relayed to us. Now, don't ever try to crack a domain computer's credentials. They're like 128 characters. You're never going to do it. You're never going to crack it. What it's good for is relaying it to a different machine that doesn't have SMB signing, or relaying it to the domain controller, it's LDAP, which will have LDAP signing set to false by default. So that's a way to secure your environment, is to have LDAP signing enabled. Hopefully that answers your question. Second one, between GoAd and Hack the Box, Zephyr, which one is better for OSEP prep? I actually haven't done Zephyr, so I really can't answer that one. However, I will say that GoAd is great. It teaches you all the same things that you learned in the OSCP, resource-based constraint delegation, we just saw how to build our own loader and stuff. It's very vulnerable, and the SE impersonate privileges on there. This is a great place, and it's free. So definitely recommend this. But I do want to check out Zephyr. That is definitely another one I want to look at. All right. I did want to show how I generated that shellcode so you guys can do it yourself. Let me come back over here. I'm missing. There we go. To generate the shellcode, all I'm doing is coming over here in Sliver, copy, and then paste. So we're going to do generate F for type of file is shellcode. We're going to give the MTLS connection string, which is my IP. By default, in the GoAd environment, we are 1. We are the router and everything, so it's just there. We're giving that 443 listener. I want to save it to dev shm payload.bin, skip symbols. Might take a second to run, but just to show you guys what it looks like, yes, overwrite the file. Let me come over here to this one. Whoop, wrong one. Let's cd to dev shm. Oop, and we actually have payload.bin over here, which is huge. Now, what I did to encrypt it, I have an RC4 file that just does the encryption for me. Let me cat it up over here. Documents RC4. This is it's like the exact same thing we saw on the C code. It's just an RC4 encryption. So all I need to do to run it, Python 3. We give it the -h key and then file name. So if we do ntdll.dll, and then we give it the file name, which is payload.bin, it's going to go through and do its thing, and then it wrote it out to payload.bin.enc. And in order to get it into that C format, so you can easily copy it over to your Visual Studio, is you can actually use XXD. And well, before that, let's move payload.bin to buff like this. The reason is when you run XXD, the way I'm about to show you, it will take the file name and make that the variable. So instead of having to open up that file in Visual Studio and then having to change it and have it lag and stuff, I'm just kind of skipping a step here. So we can overwrite it. Yes, done. And if we do XXD, tag I, buff into shellcode.c, it's going to look awesome. So watch. If we do like regular XXD, let's do on a buff. Let's just do like this. You can see it's massive. Like it's just a bunch of code. It means nothing. But if we do XXD now, not XXD, sorry. If we do just a head on the shellcode.c file like this, you can see it's in a format that we can actually use in our C code. Unsigned character buff array, it looks like this. And if we do a tail on shellcode, just like this, you can see there's the buffer length. And you can see it's like just under 10 megabytes. It's massive. So that's what that's how you basically get this in the format you need. You copy that over to Visual Studio and you compile it. And then I'm actually going to copy that over locally over here. But I do have some more questions over here. Let's take a look. Did you install GoAd on your local box or with nested virtualization? I saw it just straight on my box. Just to give you a sense of what it looks like, it's just over here like this. I have it here under Mount Games GoAd. All you have to do is run Vagrant up, and that's going to start all the virtual machines for you. They're just regular virtual machines, and then it gives you an Ansible script that once you run it, it will get everything vulnerable and set up for you. So that's all I did. The other one, and how do I avoid behavior detections? I found Sliver sessions can be killed by Defender on running Rubius or executes. Oh, we're definitely going to get into that one. And I still get detected, it's just finding ways around it. It's using the tools to their strength and knowing when they're going to get caught and whatnot. But I'm going to show you a couple different ways to get around it. What I've used in the past, what I use now. One of the main ways that I get around Defender is just by doing everything through Linux, just interacting straight with the protocols and stuff using Impacket. That's definitely one way to get around it. But with Sliver, there's a couple things you can do with like execute assembly, bypassing AMSI, and a couple different things. So I'm going to show you guys that. But first, we need to get this loader over here on our machine. So over here, so we have that. So let me secure copy from, boom. You can see I was testing it before. It was called Early Bird. So it should be basically in the same area. This Early Bird. Hopefully this works. Just like that. Don't hack me, bro. Doing it in a keyboard analytics or something. And we have the file. So you go back to evo1rm, and we'll actually show some Sliver stuff now. Best thing about evo1rm, the upload feature or download feature if you want. So all you gotta do is give it this file name, upload, Early Bird. Just like this. Give it a second. All right, and to run it, just like this. There we go. So it's set sleep for 6 seconds. The total time took for CPU 6 seconds there, and we actually have our first beacon. So I generate this with the beacon parameter in here. You didn't have to use the shellcode, so we can actually interact with it like this. 1C, and we are actually on this box, but since this is our own lab environment, I want to make it interactive. We're going to get into the Defender part in the next machine on Marine. Because we're admin on this machine, I'm going to show you my favorite command in the world on how to bypass AV. It's literally just to kill it with this. So cmd/flee, we're basically telling Defender to remove all its definitions. So since Cal Drogo is an admin on this box, we can just remove the antivirus. So now we don't have to worry about it. Sometimes that happens when you get those quick wins. And when you have them, I don't even hesitate. If you're on an internal engagement and stuff, make sure you know your ROEs and whatnot if you can do that. But in this case, like I said, it's our lab environment. I am all for it. Just kill the AV. Now it won't trigger on anything that we do, which is great. We're waiting for this machine to call back. Let's pull back over here. You can actually come over here too. You can run beacons to see when the next check-in is going to happen. I wonder if we actually may have lost it or something, because it says next check-in is yeah, it looks like it might have died. It's okay. Wrong one. Give that a second. And you can see, like, Defender is still, pretty decent. We got a call back now. U66. Make that interactive. And there's something I haven't shown yet, which if you're going to do any sort of enumeration is Bloodhound. And the reason I waited to show this part is because this trips up a lot of people for a while. If you try to run Bloodhound like right away, got our session, so now we can just directly interact with it. Let's watch this. Like if I try to run Bloodhound without first doing anything, just like this, you can actually run it through Sliver, the sharphound -4 C for all methods. You run it, it's going to fail, and it's going to fail because we don't have credentials. Something to understand is that the authentication context that we're in, we currently don't have any sort of a ticket in our system, in our session. By default, Kerberos is a single sign-on protocol. That's what it's meant to do. Kerberos is just there to solve the single sign-on problem, so you don't have to keep logging into different services and stuff. So in this case, if we do a K-list, we don't have anything. And actually, Hack the Box has a pretty good explanation on why. It's called the double hop problem. So when you use something like EVO1RM, when you connect with network authentication, our credentials are not stored in memory. And so when you try to run Sharphound, it can authenticate. So how do you get around this? Well, you can use Rubius. And what we're going to do is use what's called a net only or net logon to create a process that will have our credentials. It's basically like running like the run as command on Windows, but we're kind of doing it in a Kerberos setting. So to do that, you can just use the Rubius that's installed on the machine, on Sliver. So let's clear that out. Pop it in like this. We're just going to ask for a regular TGT for our user Caldrogo with password of horse, give it the domain, and we're telling it no wrap, so we can actually copy and paste it. So you run it, no AV, no problem. And now this is something that I didn't know for a while on how to do this before. This is something I learned from Rostam Mouse's course. So just a lot of different trainings over time. Let's grab this, and I'll show you what I'm doing. In this case, I didn't capture the E. We're doing execute assembly. Execute assembly lets you run C# or .NET programs from your local file system. So my Rubius is located here under var www.html bin rubius.exe. And the -M over here just means to bypass AMSI, and -E is to bypass event tracing for Windows. But we have disabled AV, so we don't have to do those. We do need the -I because that means in process. A Sliver limitation is that if you don't do it in process, it can only look at the first like 256 characters. So you can get around that by doing it in process. So we're going to come up to here. We're going to grab the TGT ticket that it gave us, like this. Just copy paste it. Come down here to the end. Control-Shift-V. Sometimes they'll pop up. Just run it again. I don't know. And it successfully created a net logon type of 9 for us, and it gave us a process ID that we can actually migrate into. On Copal Strike, what you can do is like steal token and steal the token of a process ID. In Sliver, our version of it is migrate. We're going to migrate into it. Give it the -P for the PID, 3480. Then use 6A. Make that interactive, just like that. And I'm going to show you what the difference is between these two. And let me actually go over to Bloodhound, and I'm actually going to clear out the database. Because we're actually going to import it our own. Yeah, it's all gone now. Okay. We come back over here. We have our session. Use 1F. And now, remember, we use that Sharphound. We can do like this. And it will work now. Because If we do execute, which means you can just execute a local command on the system, -O to get the output, cmd/c, kless, we're just calling command prompt, giving the /c to run this program. Kless, we actually have tickets versus over here where we don't. So we don't have any cache logon, but we do here because that's what Kerberos is, single sign-on. So we have our TGT, and we also have LDAP with the Marine domain controller. So this should work. And to answer that question before, how you can get around certain things, if you download the Sliver Armory, there is an unhook beacon object file. And what this will do is it will go through and unhook any sort of hooks that might be in the DLLs, such as NTDLL. You'll see this a lot in EDRs, where they'll have a bunch of different hooks set into them. But you can actually run it here and bypass AV that way. Another method you can do is, like I said, is the execute assembly -I-M-E. I've had various success. To be honest, I feel like Defender can be temperamental. There are times where I'll run the command and it won't get caught. And then I'll try it again and it will get caught. So it's like a pull, it's a tug and pull game essentially. But something else you can do, and I'll actually go this in a little bit, is there's this tool called Nimcrypt, Z-Nimcrypt. And I'll pull it up over, which one is it? This one. Here. You can basically, it's a .NET, PE, and raw shellcode package loader written in NIM. You can install it, and you can basically, it'll unhook the NTDLL for you. So anything that's in there, it'll bypass AMSI, event tracing for Windows as well, and it'll do like sandbox checks, kind of like what we did before. And I actually have had a lot of great success. Like I have a NIM Rubius here, NIM KRB relay up, and a sharpsec dump. So you can just use this tool to kind of like make your own encrypted version. Uploading it to the box, it may or may not get caught. On my case, it did. But running it with the sideload parameter, which I'll showcase in here in a minute, it gets through it. So anyway, you can see over here that Sharphound actually ran because we actually gave it the correct context. We actually gave it the correct tickets that we needed. All right, so now we can actually import this. If we do an ls, we can actually download this, like this. And it'll just download to our default directory and go add. So if you come back over here, you can open it up. Documents. And if we go to go add, we actually have our Bloodhound here. And you can import it. Now, something to note is that you can run Bloodhound from Linux, and it works great. It doesn't capture everything. So even though you can run it pretty early on and get a sense of where you want to go, what you really want to do is run it from Windows, kind of like the way I just showed you. And now that we have Bloodhound used, in case anyone doesn't know what it does, it's just an attack path tool. It can show you how to get from point A to point B and what's vulnerable. So like, we can click on find all the domain admins over here. So we have, Daenerys Targaryen, she's a domain admin and then administrator. We can see the domain trust. We can see that Essos and Seven Kingdoms have a domain trust. My favorite one, and I'm going to be sorry for the spaghetti thing that's going to show up, is shortest path to high value targets. We want Essos. And it shows a bunch of stuff. Let me see if I can parse through it. We are, it's different every single time. There it is, Bravos. So let's see if I can zoom in. So we have Khal Drogo, and we can actually see a link right here. So Khal Drogo has generic all to Viserys over here. And Viserys can PS remote. You got to really navigate this to Marine. So if we can own Viserys, we can actually get onto the domain controller. And it gives us that with this generic all option. If you right click, you can look at the help. I know it's kind of small. Bear with me. If you look at the Windows abuses, it'll basically tell you that you can target a Kerberos attack on it. But you can also do a forced password change, which is awesome. In a live environment, go for it. Do it. In a real life engagement, you need to check your ROEs to see if that's possible because you're forcing a password change on a user account, and that may disrupt their services, their day-to-day work. An even better option, so you look at the Linux, don't ignore the Linux one, is that you can actually come in here and do shadow credentials. Without really getting into it, I'm trying to scroll down. Essentially, it's just public key infrastructure. Just think public and private keys. We can upload a public key to this user's account, and we can get their hash. And it has over here a way to do it through Linux, but there's also a Windows version, and it's just called Whisker. Let's see if I can find it. Add it up. Just do a search for Whisker. There it is. You can download and compile the tool over here. So make sure you have your own development environment so you can compile these things. But with this, you can just add something to the key credential attribute. And this is what's called a shadow credentials attack. So if we come back over here, that's what we're going to do. I think it's a much better way. Since we've bypassed this, we're actually going to copy this one over here. And I'll show you what I'm doing. So in this case, once again, doing execute assembly in process. Bypassing AMSI and event tracer from Windows, but we don't need to. We might need this -I. Anyway, I have downloaded the Sharp collection to my local machine. So we have Whisker, and our target is Viserys, as we saw before. Our domain, there's the DC, and we're actually going to save the certificate path on disk, and we're going to give it a password of password 1. Make yours more secure if you can. Oop, run it again. Sometimes that happens, and there it goes. It did its magic. If you want to know more about the attack, go look at and read the GitHub. But with that, it's actually telling us what we can do next. We can ask for a TGT for the user Viserys. We're going to give it the certificate that we generated and pass it our password, the domain, the DC, get credentials, show. So let's do that. We'll do Rubius just like this, and we'll just copy and paste this. We will run into an issue with the certificate. You have to escape your backslashes. Just like this. And it worked. And just like that, we were able to recover the NTLM hash. So we can actually take this hash. We're going to lose our session here in a second. Exit it. And if you saw earlier that we own Viserys, if you saw my prompt, just like this, well, these two hashes are the same. We recover the same hash, and now we can log on to the domain controller. And now we are on, let's do a, where's it? System info? Info? Nope, hostname. Just like this, Marine. We're now on the domain controller. You can also do an IP config, and we're in .12. So we are now on it. However, if you look at our privileges, we have nothing. We are a very, very basic user. And I'm going to try to wrap it up here in the next few minutes, just to show you the last thing. I don't think they really teach this in the OSEP, but there is a no fix privilege escalation on all like Windows domain systems. So if you come up to here, is it this one? Yep. Curb relay with RBCD privilege escalation. This is a no fix local privilege escalation from a low privilege domain user to local system. This works if you're on a machine. So we actually could have done it on Bravos, but since we already owned it, we don't need to do that. But since we're a low privilege user on the domain controller, we can actually run this to modify one of the attributes the MSD I can't remember what it's exactly called. You can actually modify with through relay that we can do an RBCD attack or shadow credentials on the domain controller. So just to quickly show that, if we come over here, we're now on here. We can upload our binary, upload earlybird.exe. And let me come back over here to this one. There's another tool I really like. It's called LDeep. It's a way to interact with LDAP. I hate doing manual queries through LDAP. I won't do them. But through LDeep, it has a kind of like a wrapper for it. So all we're doing is giving us the user, the password, the domain, and our target, which is the domain controller. We're going to look at delegations. So Marine, all the domain controllers have unconstrained delegation, but there is nothing that has any sort of other delegations to it. And I want to show this before and after. So if we come back over here, let's run our early bird, just like this. Give it a second. Time taken. We actually have it now. Use CA interactive. Now, in this case, for for one of the user's questions, oh, we actually lost it like right away. It can be a real pain. Defender can be like I said, like it's getting in the way already. Let's do beacons. It might actually kill our beacon. Yeah. Give it a second. You can also do beacons, prune, tac D, anything that's 2 minutes. Yep, get rid of them. Use 3A, make that interactive. Hopefully it doesn't die. Sometimes you just gotta give it a few seconds to do its thing. If not, we can do everything through the beacon that we have. It works. Gotta wait for the check-in. But just to show you guys what we're gonna do, since we're on the machine, we're going to use that curb relay up. And that's a tool you can download and compile yourself. Use D5. So we now have an interactive session, and I'm actually going to use this nimcrypt that I was telling you before. You can actually upload it. This doesn't get caught by Defender, but this tool is. They're the same tool. One just has more of everything compiled into it already. The other one doesn't. It's more manual. So let's use this tool, and we're going to use sideload. I've had a lot of success with sideload. It's just a way of running different binaries. This one just any asset. Let's go on to the bottom. Wrong tool. Over here. Just like this. I'll explain what I'm doing in a second. All right, we're telling this tool to use the relay module of itself, domains SOS, and then we're going to give it a computer name, bishopfox2, BF, the password. We're going to tell it to create this machine because it doesn't exist. And then if you guys have ever done like any of the juicy potato stuff, you have to give it a CLS for the COM object. That's what this is. Give it a port. And if we run it, I think AV might actually catch it. However, if we are lucky, it should still have worked. It didn't that time. But you can keep trying it again. And that's kind of how I was able to solve this. But that kind of like wraps it up. I think we're really on time there. Let me bring this up over here. There you guys go. Yeah, I kind of wanted to finish it up, but that took a lot longer than I thought. So let me know if you guys like the content. If you guys want to see more of it. When I solved this lab originally, I did it a different way. Like I said, since it has certificate services on it, I end up using Petit Potam to relay the domain controller to the actual Bravos endpoint, and that gave us a domain controller certificate. And from there, we can actually authenticate, do secrets dump, and then own the domain that way, and then escalate up. So when it comes to you guys doing it, don't ever pass up ADCS, and check out the GoAd environment. It's a great place to practice and use Sliver. But yeah, so with that, just let us know if you want to see more of this. Sorry for running over there a little bit, but thank you guys for tuning in, and yeah, keep hacking.